One of the things I noticed when I was working on the book, and it's only become driven home to me even more so in the last couple of years as the book's been out and I've been sort of continuing to follow this field, is there's a really big difference right now in who influences higher ed in general. When I started at the Chronicle, it's 30 years now in May, which is, by the way, shocking to me by itself. We talked almost exclusively to higher ed associations. We called it like the one DuPont crowd. It was American Council on Education, the forerunner to APLU, the community college group. Today, those groups are still active, but there's also a whole host of other organizations. There are think tanks like the AEI and Center for American Progress and New America. All these groups are having a huge impact on sort of the policy discussions in higher ed. They're really having they raise up issues, they bring ideas to the forefront. This notion of risk sharing among institutions right now that Congress is talking about, where making colleges a little bit more liable for the default rates of their students. Like a lot of this stuff comes from these think tanks. At the same time, there's been an increasing, and it's really, this is like literally just something that's 10 years old. The Lumina Foundation has come along, and the Gates Foundation's post-secondary education program are both about a decade old each, so they're literally something that's new on the horizon. They put a lot of money into this space. I think Gates, I just did a story about this, Gates Foundation spends now about $125 million a year just on higher ed. Lumina spends about half that. And they are, they can, a little bit of money, like that's a lot of money, I mean, maybe not compared to the $600 billion industry as a whole, but they can put their finger on the scale on a lot of things, and they have. I mean, I think we're hearing a lot more about data-driven analytics in advising. We're hearing so much more about pathway programs. We're hearing, for getting students through community colleges in particular. On Lumina's side, we're hearing a lot more about the discussions about credentials and the role of credentials and the roles of alternative approaches to higher ed. I mean, one thing Lumina did, when they first got started, they were counting a lot about degree attainment, and they counted primarily associate's degrees and bachelor's degrees. I guess 2 or 3 years ago, they decided to actually change the way they count. So they now, when they talk about college attainment and having a 60% attainment rate in the country by 2025, they count high value certificates as well. I'm not exactly sure how they qualify high value, but so they themselves have sort of broadened their notion about what they think about in terms of, they use the word talent there a lot. So yeah, they've changed the conversation, and now when states talk about this, many states have actually changed their definitions too. Many states have set their own goals, and they also talk about degrees and high-quality certificates. So the conversation has really shifted in part because of these foundations, both internally in the practices of institutions, a lot with Gates and Lumina money kind of going towards a lot of these projects, and also in the way states think about educational attainment more broadly. It's pretty hard right now to find a project that in higher ed that's sort of some experiment or something that doesn't have either Gates or Lumina money behind it. I mean, other foundations play a role too. Kresge, Hewlett also play key roles. It's very different though. I think back in when I first got started, I think Mellon Foundation, I don't want to forget them, they were giving a lot more money to institutions, and I think Mellon, they all still give money to institutions, but it's with a little bit more of a direction and a kind of a focus these days. I mean, when Kresge started, they gave a lot of money for buildings. They don't give any money for buildings anymore. They're now giving much more oriented towards programs to improve student attainment, particularly aimed at lower income students, and closing the social mobility gaps.